What's going on YouTube? We're back at it for another video, and today we've got the best build for the sniper inside of Space Marine 2. And I'm telling you right now, quite surprised by this build. It has the capability of crowd control, also self-healing, self-sustaining, getting that armor back, and being able to almost have infinite ammo if you know how to work it right. There's more than a few things going on with this, and it is absolutely deleting crowds, and it's deleting those elite enemies, as well as chunking that damage when it comes down to bosses. More than likely, you're going to be having a good time with this one, and if you just know how to play it right, properly, and have the proper build, especially when it comes down to that last FUSIL, it's going to treat you and the team right, and it's going to make a lot of different missions on the Ruthless difficulty a lot easier for you in the long run. But that being said, we've got more than a few things to cover, so let's get straight into it. Starting off first with the primary weapon we're using, the last FUSIL, and the number one thing while leveling is just make sure that you're getting any one of those snipers that has the increase to magazine capacity, as ammunition will be a little bit of a hindrance for the build, but we'll be able to work around that when it comes down to the perk tree, and there is actually just one perk in particular that's going to end up giving you the capability of almost infinitely gaining that ammo back. And once you fully fill out the tree, you'll end up having the capability of also gaining maximum health back from this, which is insane to me. But when it comes down to the perk tree, we'll be starting over here on the left on the bottom row with increased capacity, just further increasing the number of ammunition we have, and the first node right after that in the green for the master crafted, the adamant restoration. When your health drops below 30%, your ammo reserve is restored by 25% of the maximum capacity and cannot exceed maximum ammo capacity, and this is a cooldown of every 30 seconds. So technically, every 30 seconds, if you're below 30% health, you'll actually be able to gain 25% of the total ammunition just refilled back into the ammunition you have. So the larger your magazine capacity, the larger amount you'll be getting back. With the full build that we have available here, you'll be getting 6 shots back every single time that you're in that 30-second cooldown window below 30% of your health. And this will work in the instances where if you're already below 30%, then you take damage and it's off the cooldown of 30 seconds, you'll get an additional 6 on top of that. It will start to stack as that cooldown just starts popping up. So this is where that possibility of infinite ammo can come from. But just after that, we'll get amplification, getting the radius of the beam weapon increased by 10%. This is going to help us out in moments where we actually have a little bit of crowd control with this, and we'll talk a little bit more about how that's an efficient way to use this weapon a little bit later on when it comes down to the perk tree, as we'll end up not having to spend ammo in order to actually utilize it for crowd control against the smaller enemies. But just above that, we'll start heading over to the top row with Headhunter, gaining additional headshot damage, and just after that, more Headhunter, and we get fast regeneration, so killing an enemy restores 0.5 seconds of the timer delayed for that armor coming back, which this sometimes can get us full armor back in certain instances where we're just lighting up crowds of those smaller enemies. So there is the capability of also getting armor back on top of getting health, but we'll talk about that here in a moment. You'll also want to get the third node just above that of the Headhunter, gaining that 30% additional headshot damage. This is going to give us the capability of being able to two-shot, or essentially two-shot any one of those elites into the finisher state and then be able to just blow their top off or allow our teammates to hit that finisher on them. But just after that, we've got the instant health. When your health is below 30%, killing 3 or more enemies with one shot restores health by 5%. I'm not 100% sure what's going on with this, but there are several times where I was capable of just shooting into crowds of those smaller enemies, and I would definitely not be getting 5%. I would be getting the entire health bar restored all the way down from even what looks like 1% of health. Seems a little bit ridiculous. There's something going on with this right now, but it is benefiting us greatly, and you're able to just get that health right back up. And this pretty much synergizes with the same fact that if we just drop ourselves to 30% and just gain that ammunition back and then just start firing off into the crowd, you'll basically be able to just bounce back and forth and maintain that type of infinite ammo loop going on. So sometimes you can just dive into the crowd, take that damage down to 30%, get your ammunition back, and then just start chewing through the crowd and get all of that health right on back, as well as possibly the armor on top of that. But just after that, for the last point, we'll be getting the perpetual velocity, just gaining the capability of firing those charge shots off 15% faster. This will be beneficial for us. And when it comes to our secondary, we're stuck with just the bolt pistol, but this is a fantastic weapon for us, and I would highly suggest going for the one that ends up having more accuracy for it. This one's actually going to benefit you because we are trying to get as many headshots as possible on some of those smaller enemies to make sure that we almost have infinite cooldown with our invisibility cloak, which is crazy. We can just keep going in and out of it and basically keep ourselves from taking any type of aggro and just being able to just keep popping those heads consistently over and over without having the fear of anything being able to take us out from range. Sometimes we can even just sit in one spot and pretty much nobody will notice us. But when it comes down to the perk tree, we'll just be going straight across the top as we're just making sure that we're getting that headshot damage, and at the very end, if we're finishing off any enemies after we've put them into that finisher state, with that melee weapon, we'll get an additional 50% more damage for 5 seconds, which this can be beneficial. If we've already run out of the last cannon fuel, we can just rely on this to still have some beefy damage with it, and we'll also have some additional headshot damage from this. And just after that, the last node, extended magazine, just further increasing the total amount of ammunition we have per magazine, further increasing our total magazine capacity up to 18, I believe. I can't remember specifically, but we'll have plenty of shots to be able to just dump into any one of the faces that we see out there. And last but not least, we will be utilizing the combat knife, the Blood of Vasas. This just gives us a little bit more speed, giving us the capability of constantly being able to perfect parry some of those. If you feel like you need a little bit more when it comes down, or a little bit better timing, or at least a little bit of leeway when it comes down to trying to get those perfect parries, then you can go with the Ophelian Liberation. That's going to have the fencing capability on it. It has a little bit more damage, but it does have less speed. I just go for the more speed just in case I ever need this, but generally we won't be using the combat knife. And sadly enough, when it comes down to the skill tree, there's a couple of skill points that are not working right now. Otherwise, there would be an interesting to build to utilize the melee weapon with. But when it comes down to the perk tree, I'm just going straight across the top, just giving me the capability of having a little bit more damage with this, since it's more of a single target type of weapon and more for just parrying things. And by the end of it, I'm just looking to get a little bit more damage reduction when it comes to utilizing this with its light combos. And when it comes down to the perk tree, sadly enough, when leveling this, the first 8 are going to be pretty lackluster for you. You're basically just going to have the ability to cloak, and everything's going to be more suited towards the bolt sniper and the stalker bolt rifles, and given a little bit of headshot damage. It's not really doing all that great, but there are 2 things that I need to key highlight here before we start getting into the skill tree itself. As of right now, targeted shot, as well as, I'm pretty sure, tactical ambush. I know for 100% fact, targeted shot is not working right now. You are not getting the 75% more damage additional with each one of the shots, even when in camo cloak. As soon as you fire it, that shot is not dealing more damage, and even if you fire just before that and then fire a shot right after, that shot just after that is not causing any type of increase to damage from the last FUSIL at least. But right now, for whatever reason, it is just not working, so this is a dead-end perk. And when I tried utilizing the tactical ambush to put together some type of melee rogue type of build with the cloaking, this also was not further increasing the overall damage output. I spent about 2 hours going into matches, just coming in, shooting one elite straight in the face with and without cloak, and it did not work. But what did work was the vantage point. So as soon as I was able to sit for 2 seconds, I did get a 20% increase. So I'll be doing a completely different video, basically showcasing the full testing on that one, where I went into each match, and I went in against the Tyrannid and I went in against the Chaos units, and both times there was a discrepancy between the damage that was dealt towards the heads that was interesting, but overall both of them consistently showed the same amount of damage with and without cloak, which was very irritating. But thankfully, the build is still super powerful, but it could be even more powerful in the future once this is actually something we can utilize. Let's get into the build itself now. Starting off at the beginning, we are going to start with Block Break, which shots against blocking and shielded enemies deal 25% of normal range damage. Now, this is basically just giving us the capability of still dealing damage towards some of those units that may be trying to block us while they're pushing forward. A lot of times the number 1 unit you'll be facing off with this type of block is going to be the dual bladed on the Tyrannid. They can be pretty frustrating, but if you get up behind them and you have the shot on the back of the head, you can generally kind of knock them out of that block. They're only capable of blocking that shot from the front with the 2 blades. And even if your crosshair is dead on their head while they're running at you, it will not actually seep through. It's much like the bulwark. Even in the PvP mode, they're able to absorb any shot no matter where it's placed, as long as it's coming from directly in front of them. Now, if you're not a big fan of this one, there is the option of Medicae Adept, where you revive your squad members 30% faster. Since we're basically going to be infinitely able to constantly go into the cloak, this is actually something that can benefit you, but generally, because I have the cloak up pretty much 100% of the time, I never really need it to be 30% faster. I can just immediately go into cloak and then run over to get that person, and it doesn't matter. So I'd much rather just have the increase of damage, even if I'm firing at a unit that is blocking themselves. Coming up in the second point, I went for Vantage Point. Remaining stationary for 2 seconds increases your primary weapon's damage by 20%. This isn't always the most noticeable thing, but since I'm able to constantly just go into cloak, I can just generally sit in one spot and just keep going in and out of the cloak as long as I'm not fully surrounded by people and I'm able to land those headshots and constantly keep that uptime with it, or at least keep recharging it by just hitting those headshots. A lot of times you'll actually be able to go into the cloak, fire off 2 rounds to 3 rounds on one of those elite units, and then just pop their head and immediately be able to go back into cloak. It's going to be a pretty powerful combo right there, and not always are you going to need to move, so this can benefit you. But the other option I would say that might end up being a little bit more beneficial, especially if you're somebody that's not exactly perfect with landing every one of those shots and you want to maximize the amount of ammunition you have available. Maybe you're always wanting to move with this one, not really sitting stationary. High capacity is going to be a great secondary option, increasing your total maximum amount of ammo you can carry by 10% for both the pistol and the last FUSIL. Coming up right after that for the third row, sadly enough, while leveling with this, it is going to take quite a while to start getting some of these greater perks for this build, but the last one we've got here is Lethal Efficiency. Killing more than one enemy with one shot of the last FUSIL restores its charge by 1. So when we're firing into those crowds of smaller enemy units, as long as we're killing 2 of them at a time, we'll never be wasting those shots, and you can already think about how some of those crowds are so large, you're able to just penetrate through so many of them, and killing 2 of them at one time is very easy. And sometimes you can actually find yourself firing off into the crowd and hitting the elites at the same time, since it is just a massive laser beam going through, and you'll be able to not only save rounds with this, but also still be dealing damage towards the larger targets, as well as clearing the smaller ones. Coming up right after that, which is one of the craziest perks that I've seen so far that can just work in any different group combination that is going to be hugely beneficial, is Squad Renewal. A headshot kill restores ability charge by 10% for any squad member. So any one of your squad members landing any headshot, they're getting 10% back of the refill for the charge of their ability. So Tactical's going to have their char or their scan up all the time. Heavy's going to have the capability of constantly going and popping that halo up. You've also got the capability of the bulwark constantly being able to drop that banner. And the big thing here is just utilizing your secondary weapon or even your primary weapon if you're on the tactical. And a lot of times with the heavy, it's just very easy to just use whatever weapon you're using to get headshots, and it's going to rack up really quickly. And this is one of the ways that we're going to be able to maintain constantly being able to infinitely go back into that cloak and be able to just basically play like we're invisible for almost the entire match, as long as we have some of those heads to pop, and especially even when just facing off with those elite units. Now, just after that, with the first perk in the gear that we'll be putting our point into is Renewal. A headshot kill restores Camo's cloak charge by 5%, so that way every time that we're popping one of those heads, we're getting 15% towards that Camo cloak charge. So the big thing about this is the fact that once we go into cloak, it's one of those that's like the Halo duration, where we can just stop it at any time, or whenever it breaks, that's where it stops the charge. It doesn't fully use that entire charge every time that we use it. So we'll go in, we'll be able to pop one head and then just have 15% go all the way back up to 100 and ready for that Camo cloak yet again right after that. Just making it even easier for us to just have that capability of constantly having this uptime. When it comes down to the second gear perk, sadly enough, we're just going for Guardian Protocol. When you're reviving a squad member, Camo Cloak hides you and the squad member for 5 seconds without spending a charge, and it has a cooldown of 30 seconds. So anytime that you run over to actually just be able to revive somebody, they're going to get Cloak, and you'll have Cloak extended beyond yours as well. And that'll just give them a little bit more survivability, especially if they're in the middle of a crowd. That'll give them the capability of kind of running out and getting a good footing to be able to just start mulching through that crowd themselves, since sadly enough, the number one thing that I wanted to utilize with this build was targeted shot, so that way I could one-shot the elite units and be able to put them into that finisher state. But sadly, we will not have that capability. It'll almost always be 2 shots to the head to put them into the finisher state, and then 1 more to pop their head off or just finish them off in that spot. And the sad part is the tactical ambush is also not working in this state. So right now, Guardian Protocol, until they fix these 2 perks, is going to be the number 1 slot. Coming up right after that for our third gear slot, we've got the Lingering Concealment, which after performing an attack that breaks the Camo Cloak, you remain hidden for 2 seconds. So every time, even after we pop the Camo and stop the charge going, we still have 2 more seconds, and this is just going to make us basically concealed the entire time, because within those 2 seconds just after that, we'll be able to pop another head and then reactivate the ability and basically permanently, in some instances, be inside of Cloak. And last but not least, for our signature ability, we're going with Emergency Override, just basically giving us another life. When you receive lethal damage, Camo Cloak automatically activates without spending a charge, and you become invulnerable for 5 seconds, and this has a cooldown of 180 seconds. This is perfect for the Ruthless difficulty. It basically gives you the capability of going down twice, because when you do go down with this, you don't technically go into the Mortal Wounded state, so you'll be able to go down another time after that, and I mean, within 3 minutes, more than likely you're going to be able to survive for those next 3 minutes, and this is just going to give you the capability of kind of giving a little bit of that tanky vibe, or a little bit of leeway in case you're facing off with one of those mini boss units, especially the Carnifex. That one can sometimes be pretty irritating, or even in some boss fights you just get caught off guard. It takes the aggro on top of you, and if you're trying to land some of those shots and trying to get it into the face, you might get caught up in some of those moments, or with the dodges, etc. Any number of things when it comes down to the lethal damage in this game could happen, especially if you're just trying to get some of that ammo back when you're trying to dip down to 30%. But Emergency Override's just going to end up helping us out in the long run and creating a better survivability output from this build itself. But that's going to be the build in a nutshell. When it comes down to general tips, I would highly suggest whenever you're facing off with elite units, just pop that cloak and then start landing those headshots on them. Try to pop that head if you're in the middle of a giant wave of them coming in. That way you're constantly able to maintain that overall invisibility and just keep focusing on those elite units until you get down to the point where you possibly need to either gain health or possibly need to start to chew through that crowd in order to gain some of that ammunition back. Those are the few times that I would say you want to just start blindly just dumping that ammunition, because a lot of times you will want to conserve. You want to make sure that your teammates are able to take out some of those elite units. That way you're just not burning your entire ammunition supply every time you face off with any group that you may be facing off with along each one of the missions. Because it's very easy to just burn through that ammo just by headshotting every single one of the elite units you see. Kind of pick and choose your fights unless there is a massive wave coming in, and that way you can kind of utilize that, dropping to 30% health, and then always have some type of giant crowd to be able to maintain that health over time and gain a little bit of that ammunition and then just gain the health right on back. And do be mindful to let your teammates know if they're gaining those headshots, they're getting that 10% back when it comes down to their ability charge. So if you let people know with that while you're running this build, they're going to be able to pretty much dump out their abilities as well. And if you've got tactical on your team, that just makes your last FUSIL even more deadly. So anytime that they're able to prop that scan, you're probably going to have the capability of being able to one-shot some of those enemies, especially if they have that maximum 200% increase on that overall damage output. It's going to be something that really bumps up the last FUSIL, and it is very noticeable. But I was actually able to solo the second operation on Ruthless difficulty all the way up until the boss fight, and I ended up just having too much of the aggro of the boss on me. I had a Bulwark and an Assault class playing with me, and you can already understand how that can be a very frustrating fight to end up having. That ended up basically putting it all on my back, and when that boss unit's fully aggroed on you and you've got the last FUSIL trying to land those headshots, it's just not going to be a very easy experience. But for the rest of the time, just taking on massive amounts of crowds, being able to just chew through them, survive, and be able to land all those shots, stay invisible, and basically just tank entire massive waves on Ruthless by yourself. It's crazy that this build can actually get this done, and it was a whole lot of fun for me. And if you're playing with 2 other players that know what they're doing, possibly even a heavy and a Bulwark, it's going to be a very destructive force that pretty much clears every bit of the content through Ruthless. But that's going to be it right there, guys. Let me know down in the comments below what's been your favorite class if you've been playing with a sniper. What is your favorite option when it comes down to how you play the sniper? I've been trying, I really wanted the melee type of rogue build with this. I wasn't sure whether or not it'd be better than this, but after conducting the testing and finding that basically neither one of those perks was actually increasing the overall damage output, it was a bit of a letdown. And I was very irritated. For the longest time I'd been putting that perk on, and it basically had just been doing nothing for me. I kept saying to myself while I was on stream, why is it just not having the capability of one-shotting some of these elites? I felt like after that 75%, like that should be that moment where I'm just getting that massive damage increase, but it just never felt like I did. And after testing it, it is sadly enough not working for right now. There may be some other broken things about the sniper, but there's other broken things about the perks inside of that tree. But let me know down in the comments below how you feel about it. But on that note, if you'd like to see more content like this in the future, hit that subscribe button. We've got plenty more Space Marines 2 loadouts coming in the future, as well as more content to be made. And if you'd like to see some of this content live, hit that link down in the description below. Follow me over at Twitch. We'll be streaming daily. And on that note, have a good one.